Good evening, everybody. I hope my first video will be relaxing and help you drift off to sleep. Tonight, I'll be narrating the tale of the Flying Dutchman, one of Bikini Bottom's most mysterious legends. So, get cozy under the blanket, let the day fade away, and let's begin. The waters above Bikini Bottom were calm that night, almost unnaturally so. It was the kind of stillness that felt heavy, as though the ocean itself was holding its breath. From the edge of jellyfish fields to the soft sands of Goo Lagoon, everything rested in quiet slumber. The moon hung low, pale and round, its light falling through the water in shimmering silver beams, dancing gently over the rooftops of the sleeping town. SpongeBob's pineapple home sat in darkness, save for a faint glow from the kitchen, a single nightlight shaped like a jellyfish, casting soft shadows on the tiled floor. Not far away, the Krusty Krab sign swayed faintly in the current, though there was no wind to move it. In that strange stillness, even the distant hum of the Chum Bucket's machinery seemed to fade. It was in nights like this that whispers began. Not loud ones, the ocean doesn't speak in shouts, not when the deep is listening. These whispers were the kind that traveled slowly, curling around coral towers and weaving between kelp fronds, finding their way into the ears of those who still dared to stay awake. The Flying Dutchman is out tonight. Those words were never shouted. They were warnings, spoken carefully, as though the very sound might draw the ghost's attention. For as long as anyone in Bikini Bottom could remember, the Flying Dutchman had been part of the ocean's oldest tales. He was not just a pirate. He was the pirate, the one whose name was carved into the bones of the sea itself. A green glow in the distance, a wisp of spectral fog, the faint creak of timbers where no ship should sail. These were the signs that the Dutchman had returned. On this night, the signs were there. It began with the fog. Fog underwater is not like the fog of the surface world. On land, mist hangs in the air, soft and white. But here, in the deep, it swirls like green smoke, curling low along the sandy floor, clinging to the bases of coral and creeping into alleyways between buildings. This was not a natural fog. The citizens of Bikini Bottom knew its color too well. It was that strange, faintly glowing green. It was the same shade as the Dutchman's ghostly beard. Old Man Walker, the grizzled purple fish who tended the local cemetery, was the first to spot it that night. From his small shack by the gates, he saw the mist rolling in from the west. His fins stiffened, and though he wouldn't admit it aloud, his heart began to race. He had seen that glow before, and he knew, better than most, that where the fog went, the Dutchman followed. Further out, beyond the city limits, the seafloor rose gently into jagged, rocky slopes. It was there, in the open water, that the silhouette appeared. At first, it seemed like nothing more than a shadow against the moonlight filtering from above. But slowly, it took shape. Tall masts, torn sails that flapped though there was no current, and a long, narrow bow that cut silently through the water. No oars, no wake, no sound of a hull pushing through sand. It simply drifted. The ghost ship was massive, its timbers dark with age, but its edges shimmered faintly as though not fully part of this world. Chains hung from the sides, swaying gently, and strange barnacle-like growths pulsed faintly with green light. Where lanterns might have burned on an ordinary vessel, here there were orbs of ghostly fire, floating and swaying without any ropes or hooks to hold them. And above it all was him. The Flying Dutchman stood at the bow, one ghostly boot resting on the rail, his long green beard curling and writhing like seaweed in a current that wasn't there. His single good eye, the other forever hidden beneath the brim of his ragged pirate hat, scanned the dark waters ahead. Even at a distance, one could feel that gaze, sharp as a cutlass. His tattered coat floated around him, the ends frayed but never quite settling, as if the fabric itself resisted rest. He didn't need to shout orders to a crew. The ship moved as he willed it, guided by the curse that bound him to it. And somewhere, deep in the hull, his treasure chest, the one they called the Chest of Souls, pulsed faintly, each beat a reminder of the countless poor souls who had crossed the Dutchman's path. Back in Bikini Bottom, the fog had reached the outskirts. It slipped between the anchor-shaped houses and the small round ones made of coral. A faint, eerie creak seemed to echo through the streets, though no one could say from where. Curtains were drawn, Doors were locked, not because the Dutchman always brought harm, but because no one knew when he might. Even SpongeBob, who had once found himself on the Dutchman's ship by pure accident, had learned that the ghost pirate's moods were unpredictable. Sometimes, he offered deals, games, even tours of his ship. Other times, he'd snatch you up for breaking some obscure ghostly code, like leaving your socks lying around. In the eyes of the Dutchman, the rules were his alone to make. From the far side of town, Squidward peeked through his blinds. He had no intention of getting involved. He'd had enough of ghostly adventures, thank you very much, but still, he watched. That green glow had a way of drawing the eye, even when you knew better. The ship grew closer, its form more distinct now. The hull bore scars, deep gouges from sea monster attacks, patches of strange, glowing wood where old damage had been replaced with something not quite natural. One anchor dragged behind, not touching the seafloor but suspended a few feet above it, as though even gravity couldn't quite decide what to do with it. Somewhere in the distance, a low, haunting sound began. It wasn't a song exactly, nor a bell, but something in between. A deep, resonating tone that vibrated through the water, setting the coral swaying ever so slightly. Those who had heard it before knew this was the Dutchman's call, not to summon anyone, but simply to remind the sea that he was here. The ship slowed, turning ever so slightly toward the cemetery on the edge of town. Old Man Walker stiffened again, clutching his shovel. The green glow thickened in the water, wrapping the gravestones in ghostly light. And then, for just a moment, the Dutchman's voice rolled across the deep, deep booming, yet carrying a strange humor within it. Another fine night for a haunting. That night would be remembered in whispers for weeks to come, but it was only the beginning. For the Flying Dutchman's story stretches far beyond any single haunting, back into a time before Bikini Bottom existed, when the pirate was still a man of flesh and bone, and the curse that bound him was yet to come. And so, the tale begins. Long before his name was whispered in the streets of Bikini Bottom, long before his ship cut silently through the deep glowing in its green haze, the Flying Dutchman was just a man. Of course, few living today know the details. Ghosts do not often speak plainly about their mortal days, but over the years, through bits of conversation, offhand remarks, and the scattered fragments of gossip that float like driftwood in the current, a picture of his past begins to take shape. The Dutchman himself, when pressed, has let slip hints about what came before the curse. One of the clearest came during an offhand conversation, overheard by SpongeBob and Patrick in Shanghai. Between his bursts of laughter and sharp demands, the ghost pirate muttered something about the day they sent me to Davy Jones' locker before I had me ghostly beard. It wasn't much wuss, but it was a glimpse into a time when he still breathed, when his coat was not yet worn by the sea, and when his feet still touched the deck with the weight of the living. From what can be gathered, the Dutchman was once the captain of a proud pirate vessel, not a ghost ship, not a cursed craft of glowing timbers, but a real, seaworthy ship built in the days before modern Bikini Bottom existed. He sailed the open waters of the deep ocean, commanding a crew of the toughest, saltiest sea dogs ever to hold a cutlass. His voice could be heard across the deck, barking orders as the sails filled with current and the hull sliced through coral-lined straits. In those days, his treasure was gold and silver, not the souls of the departed. He raided merchant vessels, clashed with rival pirates, and outwitted more than one sea monster. The ocean was vast, dangerous, and alive, and the Dutchman thrived in it. But the sea has a way of turning even the boldest captains toward their fate. According to an old legend told in Scaredy Pants, the Dutchman's end came suddenly. After years of ruling the waves, he died, and not in the glory of battle, as some would expect, but in a manner far more humiliating. As the tale goes, when the Dutchman passed, his body was placed in a wooden chest. His crew buried him at sea, thinking that would be the end, but the ocean, it seems, had other plans. His spirit could not rest. Whether it was the weight of unfinished business, the pull of a curse, or simply the stubborn will of a pirate who refused to be forgotten, the Dutchman returned, not in the flesh, but in ghostly form. His beard now burned with an unearthly green fire. His eyes glowed in the dark waters, and his ship, once a mortal vessel, was remade in his own cursed image. It's said that the chest his body was buried in became the infamous chest of souls he carries to this day. No longer a coffin, but a prison. A place to trap those who cross him, locking their spirits away as part of his growing collection. In Shanghai, SpongeBob and Patrick saw it themselves, feeling the strange energy it gave off. It was cold to the touch, the wood seeming to breathe in the still air of the ship's hold. Over time, the Dutchman's legend grew. His ship began to appear in places no living vessel could go: deep trenches, cursed reefs, even the skies above the ocean during strange storms. His crew, if he still had one, was never seen. The ship answered to him alone, its sails shifting to follow his will, its anchor lifting and lowering without a hand to touch it. The curse that bound him was twofold. First, he could never set foot on land, a fate shared by many ghostly sailors of the old world. The sea was both his home and his prison. Second, he was doomed to haunt the living, forever seeking to strike fear into their hearts. Whether this was punishment for his deeds in life, or simply the natural calling of a restless pirate spirit, none could say. But the Dutchman seemed to take to it with relish. And yet, for all his fearsome ways, there are cracks in the legend. In Ghost Host, when SpongeBob offered him a place to stay while his ship was in for repairs, the Dutchman revealed an almost lonely side. He confessed, in his booming yet strangely wistful voice, that haunting had lost some of its thrill for him. Centuries of scaring the living had dulled the excitement. This small glimpse suggested that beneath the ghostly glow and booming laugh was a spirit who, in his own way, still longed for the liveliness of his mortal days. It's this contradiction, the fierce, fearsome captain, and the occasionally bored, even playful trickster, that makes the Dutchman more than just a story to frighten children. He is, in some strange sense, still a man of the sea, caught between worlds, unable to fully let go of either. Even his name holds power. In life, it might have been something else entirely, but in death, he became the Flying Dutchman. Flying, a name spoken across the oceans, feared in places far beyond Bikini Bottom. Other seafaring folk have claimed to see him, ghostly sails cutting across the current in the Mariana Trench, green light flickering in the black waters of the Midnight Zone, a ship-shaped shadow passing silently through the ruins of Atlantis. Whether these are truth or tall tales, they only add to the legend. And so, the Dutchman's past lives on, pieced together from fragments, half-truths, and the few times he has let his guard slip. He is a creature of the present and the past, bound by the ocean's will and his own restless spirit. Each haunting, each appearance, is another chapter in a story that began long before SpongeBob ever flipped his first Krabby Patty. On nights when the fog rolls in and the green glow stains the water, the citizens of Bikini Bottom remember this history, even if they don't speak it aloud. They remember that once, long ago, the Dutchman was flesh and blood, and they know that as long as the sea remains, his ghost will roam it, forever searching, forever haunting. The fog from that first night still lingered faintly as the next chapter of his legend began, not in the darkness of the open sea, but in the streets and waters where he would make his first known appearances to the modern residents of Bikini Bottom. The Curse of the Flying Dutchman is not a simple story told in a single breath. It is stitched together from glimpses, from things he has said when his guard was down, from episodes of temper and bursts of pride, from moments when the truth of his condition slipped out between the jokes and the thunder. To understand him, you must piece these fragments together like planks in a shipwreck, until the shape of his fate comes into view. The most telling piece of his curse comes from a night that still lives in Bikini Bottom's collective memory, the Halloween of Scaredy Pants. That night, when the Dutchman appeared in full form above the streets, green fog spilling from the ghost ship's sides, he declared in his booming voice, "It is I, the Flying Dutchman, feared throughout the seven seas. I'm here to haunt you for all eternity." That last part was no exaggeration. His haunting is not seasonal. It is not a pastime he picks up when bored and sets down when satisfied. It is his existence, stretched out without end. Eternity is the measure of his curse, and the ocean is both his kingdom and his cage. The old tales say he was once a living pirate, sailing a mortal ship across the deep. His end, however, was not the glorious fall in battle that a man like him might have expected. In a quieter, more humiliating fate, one he himself has mentioned with a certain bitterness, he died, and his body was placed in a coffin. His crew buried him at sea, thinking the ocean would keep him. But the sea had other plans. Something called him back, something that would not let him rest. When he rose again, it was not as a man. His beard burned green, his eyes glowed, and the coffin he had been laid in was no longer a coffin at all. It had become the chest of souls he carries with him to this day. That chest is more than a trophy. It is the evidence of every spirit he has claimed since the curse began, and perhaps a reminder of the moment his life ended and his haunting began. From that day forward, he could never set foot on land. He could visit the seafloor, drift through underwater cities like Bikini Bottom, but the dry surface world was forever out of reach. His ship became part of him, just as he became part of it. No crew was needed. The masts turn to his will, the sails fill when he desires them to, and the anchor rises or falls without a single hand on the rope. In Shanghai, when SpongeBob, Patrick, and Squidward boarded his vessel, there was no living soul aboard but him, yet the ship moved as if fully manned. The curse also bound him to the work of haunting. It is not merely something he enjoys, it is what the magic that sustains him demands. Without it, perhaps he would fade, or perhaps he would be pulled somewhere far worse than the open sea. In Ghost Host, when SpongeBob offered him shelter during repairs to his ship, the Dutchman admitted that scaring people had become routine for him. He had grown tired of it, but still, he could not stop. Even boredom could not break the pattern of his curse. This haunting is not without rules, though they are rules of his own making. In Scaredy Pants, he punished SpongeBob not for malice, but for failing to be scary enough on Halloween night. In his mind, even ghosts must uphold certain standards. In Shanghai, he offered the trespassers on his ship a choice between 3 doors, each leading to a different fate. None of the choices were pleasant, but the fact that he offered them at all suggests that part of his haunting involves giving his victims a chance, however slim, to influence the outcome. The powers that come with his curse are formidable. He can appear anywhere without crossing the space between. He can pass through walls, doors, and solid rock as though they were no more than drifting mist. He can grow to immense size, towering over his ship, or shrink small enough to peer out from behind a single object. In Shanghai, he transformed Squidward into a living shell with a flicker of green light. In Ghost Host, he rearranged SpongeBob's home into a shifting maze for his own amusement. Objects move for him without touch. Lanterns flare when he enters a room. Chains rise and coil at his will. But these powers are not simply privileges. They are expressions of the curse, tools for the work he cannot escape. His ship, his beard, the glow in his eyes, the green light that surrounds him, all are woven into the magic that keeps him here. None of it is optional. None of it can be set aside. And always, there is the chest. In Shanghai, when SpongeBob and Patrick wandered into the hold and found it, the reaction was immediate. The Dutchman appeared between them and the exit, blocking their way without raising his voice. The chest is his, and it is part of the curse as much as the ship is. Some believe destroying it would destroy him. Others think it is his anchor, the thing that prevents the curse from scattering him into nothing. The truth is known only to him, and perhaps to the souls inside. It is a strange fate, when you think about it. To live forever in the waters you once sailed freely, but never to reach land again. To hold the power to terrify any creature alive, but never to stop using it. To carry with you the evidence of every life you've touched in your afterlife, and never to set it down. The Dutchman's curse is not the fiery punishment of a villain in a storybook. It is the slow, unending tide of repetition, the knowledge that tomorrow will bring the same work as today, and that the work will go on long after the living have forgotten your name. And yet, he wears it well. When he appears in the fog over Bikini Bottom, when he drifts through the green light that heralds his arrival, he carries himself with the bearing of a captain who still commands his ship, who still rules his part of the sea. If the curse has eroded any part of him, it has not touched his pride. So when you see him, if you ever do, remember that what you are looking at is not just a ghost, not just a pirate. You are seeing a man in the middle of an eternal voyage, bound to a ship that is bound to him, carrying a chest that may hold the key to his own existence. His powers are the current that moves him, and the curse is the tide he can never escape. When the green light fills the water and the chains rattle in the stillness, When the ship turns in your direction without a single sail shifting, you will understand why he said he would haunt you for all eternity. It is not just a threat, it is a promise, one he has been keeping for longer than anyone can remember. The first time most of Bikini Bottom truly saw the Flying Dutchman was not on the open sea, but in the soft-lit streets of their own town. Sightings had been whispered about long before then, stories traded at the salty spittoon, or murmured in the quiet corners of the Krusty Krab between the lunch rush and dinner. A friend of a friend had glimpsed him near rock bottom, they'd say. Or an uncle once swore he saw the green light brushing the side of his fishing boat before it vanished into the trench. But a whispered sighting is like a cloud on the horizon. You don't understand the storm until you stand in the rain yourself. It was on Halloween, a night the Dutchman always seemed drawn to, when his presence stopped being rumor and became a truth everyone could measure. The streets of Bikini Bottom were thick with costumes, laughter, and the rustle of paper candy bags. Lanterns carved into bright orange shells flickered from porches. The air, cool and steady, was perfumed with kelp corn and the faint, sugary smoke from homemade taffy. Most thought of Halloween as the one night the strange and scary were allowed to roam freely without consequence. But to the Dutchman, it was the one night when the bar for fear was set far too low. That year, SpongeBob had donned what he considered a terrifying disguise. The ghost of a ghost, fashioned from a sheet trimmed into jagged edges, with eye holes cut just a touch too large. He drifted between houses, accompanied by the comfortable rhythm of friends and neighbors, all enjoying the safe kind of fright, the kind that comes with sweets and familiar streets. The Dutchman, watching from somewhere beyond sight, found it disappointing. Ghosts, he believed, should uphold the dignity of the title. They should chill the water, bend the light, make hearts skip with the clean, precise edge of a well-made scare. SpongeBob's good-natured attempts fell far short. The fog arrived before the laughter stopped. It spilled from between houses, settling around the coral fences and lampposts, coating the cobblestones with a sheen that made reflections of the jack-o'-lanterns shiver in the ground. The green light, subtle at first, began to color the edges of every shadow. And then the ship came, impossibly large, sliding into the streets as though the town had been built to make way for it. Lanterns burned brighter, chains clinked in the still air, and every conversation quieted at once. The Dutchman stood at the bow, arms folded, looking down on the scene like a master craftsman inspecting work done poorly in his absence. His voice carried without volume, deep and even. "Is this what you call scary?" The words landed like a weight on the evening. SpongeBob, proud of his costume, nodded enthusiastically, until the Dutchman's eyes narrowed and the green light deepened. He spoke again, this time with the kind of clarity that turned the night from play into history. "Number, let me show you scary." The next moments would become legend in themselves. The Dutchman's face shifted, lengthening into something sharp and ancient. His jaw unhinged wider than any living mouth should, and his voice rose into a howl that was part storm, part ancient rope snapping under strain. Around him, the ship tilted without moving, and the fog spiraled upward like smoke from a great fire. Doors rattled in their frames. Signs creaked without wind. The ground itself seemed to hum, and when SpongeBob, trembling, tried to retreat, the Dutchman's beard reached forward like a living net, wrapping around him just enough to remind him that escape was impossible until allowed. The scare worked. It more than worked. It etched itself into the bones of the town. From that night onward, every citizen knew the difference between the kind of fright you purchase with candy and the kind that arrives with a captain's hat and a chest full of souls. It was the first time the Dutchman had given them his full attention, and it would not be the last. But even after that, sightings remained rare enough to be events in themselves. A fisherman might report green light moving beneath his boat in waters far from shore. A diver would swear she saw a massive shadow pass across the mouth of a cave, too large to belong to any creature known to science. Each account added another layer to the Dutchman's presence, making him less a figure of isolated incidents and more a part of the ocean's permanent architecture. Some sightings came with conversation. In Shanghai, Squidward, SpongeBob, and Patrick found themselves aboard the Dutchman's ship after an unfortunate encounter with a treasure chest they had no business touching. Squidward's panic, SpongeBob's misplaced cheer, and Patrick's confusion blended into the kind of chaos the Dutchman alternately found irritating and entertaining. He offered them choices, each leading to a fate worse than the last, and they learned firsthand the truth behind the town's whispers. When the Flying Dutchman speaks, you listen. When he offers you a way out, you take it, though even then, the way out might not be the one you want. These appearances were not constant. The Dutchman valued the weight of absence. Too much presence and a legend becomes routine. Too much routine and it loses its teeth. He came when the mood suited him, when the night was prepared to hold his weight, when the fog rolled just right and the sea felt like keeping a secret. Sometimes he would vanish again without taking anything but the memory of the encounter. Other times he left with a prize, a soul for his chest, or a piece of property that had, in his eyes, drifted too close to his. Either way, the sightings always ended the same, the green light receding, the fog folding itself back into corners, and the sound of chains fading until the water forgot it had ever carried them. The first public sighting in Bikini Bottom had changed something in the town's imagination. Now, when fog crept low over the streets, and the light took on the faintest shade of green, everyone remembered the Halloween when the Dutchman came to judge their scaring skills. They remembered his towering presence, the glow in his eyes, and the way his ship seemed to belong in the streets as much as any building. And they understood, in a way they hadn't before, that some legends don't just visit, they check in, to make sure their place in the world is still understood. The Flying Dutchman's ship is not like other ships. It is not bound to the slow logic of wind and current, nor is it limited by the weight of crew and cargo. It moves with the ease of a thought, turning and gliding in waters too shallow for its size, appearing where no route could possibly have brought it. To step aboard is to leave the familiar rhythm of the sea and enter a world that belongs entirely to its captain. The first thing you notice is the green glow. It doesn't come from lanterns exactly, though lanterns hang in their places, but from the very timbers of the ship itself. The glow rises from the deck planks, as though the wood remembers light from some other world and cannot quite let go of it. It clings to the rigging, slides along the edges of the rail, and pools in the hollows between boards. Every shadow seems a little deeper because of it, as though the ship wants you to understand both light and dark in sharper detail. In Shanghai, when SpongeBob, Patrick, and Squidward first found themselves on this deck, they saw no crew bustling about, no hands at the wheel, no cook tending to a galley. The Dutchman stood alone, his posture easy but his presence filling every space where a dozen sailors might once have been. This absence of crew is not an oversight, it's a choice. The ship obeys him directly. Sails unfurl when he wishes it, ropes tighten without being pulled. The wheel turns as though it can hear his thoughts. It is less a vessel he commands and more an extension of himself. Yet for all its ghostly efficiency, the ship is not silent. Chains sway with no wind, their links clinking in patterns too deliberate to be accidents. Somewhere, deep within, wood creaks in a rhythm more like breathing than settling. Every so often, there's the faint scrape of something heavy shifting far below deck, followed by the hum of the chest of souls. A sound too low to be entirely heard, felt more as a shiver through the soles of your feet. The deck holds signs of a crew long gone, barrels lashed to the rails, coiled ropes that seem to stay perfectly round no matter how often the ship moves, a spyglass mounted but always pointing toward nothing you can see. Every object feels as though it could spring to use at any moment, as though the ghosts of sailors past are always just a step out of sight, waiting for a signal from their captain. Inside, the ship is a maze of narrow corridors and sudden wide rooms. The walls lean in slightly, warped by age, or perhaps by the pressure of years lived in a place that does not fully belong to this world. Lamps burn without oil, their flames as green as the lanterns outside, casting light that seems to carry more weight than warmth. The air is dense here, not stifling but full, like walking through a memory you can't quite shake off. In Shanghai, the Dutchman offered his unwanted guests a choice between 3 doors in just such a corridor. Behind each door lay a different fate, some absurd, others genuinely dangerous. The doors themselves seemed ordinary, but there was a sense that they could lead anywhere the Dutchman willed, to a kitchen, to a treasure hold, to an entirely different place in the sea. This unpredictability is part of life aboard his ship. You never quite know whether the next step will take you deeper into its bowels or drop you somewhere far from the ocean entirely. The galley is a place SpongeBob took special interest in, though it hardly matched his ideas of a proper kitchen. The stove was rusted but functional in its own way. Pots hung neatly but clanged together when no one was near them, and the smell of brine was stronger than any scent of food. Meals here are not made for comfort. When the Dutchman eats, it is less a matter of sustenance and more an act of habit, a faint echo of his life before the curse. He can conjure food as easily as he can conjure fog, but it rarely looks or tastes quite right to the living. Deeper still is the hold, where the chest of souls rests. Life aboard the ship is shaped around this object, though it is rarely spoken of. The Dutchman visits it often, not always opening it, but standing near as though listening. The crewless ship seems to hold its breath in these moments. Even the glow dims slightly, as if the vessel itself is giving him privacy. No one else is allowed to linger here for long. Not SpongeBob, not Patrick, not Squidward, not anyone. It is the one place on the ship where curiosity feels immediately dangerous. At night, though night is a strange concept on a ship that obeys no sun or moon, the Dutchman sometimes walks the deck alone. The glow from the water below reflects up onto his face, and the sails shift just enough to keep the ship moving in some unseen current. The quiet is not absolute. The sea still murmurs against the hull, and the faint rattle of chains still keeps time. But it is a quieter quiet, one that belongs only to those who have learned to live with the endless company of the ocean and themselves. In Ghost Host, when the Dutchman stayed with SpongeBob during repairs, he complained about the monotony of his haunting duties. Here, aboard his own ship, you can see how that boredom might take root. With no crew to talk to, no port to dock in, and no real destination, the days, if they can be called days, blend into one another. Even for an immortal ghost, time aboard the ship can stretch thin. It's perhaps why he enjoys visitors, even uninvited ones. They break the pattern, give him something to play with, test, or teach. Life aboard the ghost ship is not hostile by default. It is watchful, waiting to be directed. The ship seems almost to enjoy having someone else's footsteps on its deck, so long as those footsteps respect its master's rules. But make no mistake, everything aboard belongs to the Dutchman, from the smallest coil of rope to the largest mast. Even the air feels claimed, borrowed from him for as long as you breathe it here. For those rare few who have been aboard and returned, the memory lingers in more than sight and sound. It is in the way their dreams take on a green tint for a few nights after. In the way they swear they can hear a faint creak when a room is completely still. In the way they sometimes wake certain they've been watched, though the feeling fades before they can decide if it was real. The ship leaves its mark without needing to keep you. And somewhere, always, the Dutchman is there, moving between rooms without a sound, appearing suddenly beside you, or watching from the quarterdeck with that measured, knowing expression. He does not rush. Life aboard his ship is built for patience, and patience is something he has in infinite supply. The ship will carry him anywhere, but there is no anywhere that he needs to be quickly. The sea is vast, eternity is long, and the Flying Dutchman sails both as their undisputed master. The Flying Dutchman's presence is only partly explained by the creak of his ship or the green fog that precedes him. What truly sets him apart from the many strange creatures of the sea are his powers, abilities that seem limitless to the living, and the curse that binds him to use them. These two things are not separate. His powers are the expression of the curse, the ways in which it shapes his existence. Without the curse, he might have been just another ghost, adrift and fading. With it, he is an anchor point in the ocean's deep memory, feared and respected in equal measure. The curse is the oldest part of his story. In whispers and tavern tales, it is said that he was once a mortal pirate captain, bold and clever, feared for the swiftness of his ship and the cunning of his raids. But his end did not come in the glory of battle. Instead, it came in an ordinary, almost humiliating way. His crew buried him at sea, sealing him in a coffin to rest forever beneath the waves. But the sea did not keep him. Something, perhaps an old debt, perhaps an unfulfilled purpose, perhaps the sea itself, called him back. When he returned, it was not as a man. His beard glowed with a green fire no living hair could hold. His eyes burned like lanterns in a storm, and the coffin that had held him was no longer a coffin at all. It had become the chest of souls, a container not just for his own spirit but for those he would claim in the centuries to come. From that moment forward, the curse bound him to the ocean and to the work of haunting. The most visible of his powers is his ship itself. No wind is needed for its sails, no current for its movement. It appears where he wills it, whether in the middle of the open sea or in the narrow streets of Bikini Bottom. In Shanghai, the ship carried SpongeBob, Patrick, and Squidward effortlessly to places they had never seen. And yet it always seemed to return to the exact point the Dutchman desired. The ship is an extension of him, and it obeys him in silence, as though it listens directly to his thoughts. His control over the physical world extends far beyond his vessel. He can pass through solid matter, emerging on the other side as though walls and doors are nothing more than mist. In Ghost Host, he transformed SpongeBob's pineapple into a shifting maze, warping rooms and rearranging furniture with a casual flicker of thought. Objects move for him without touch. Chains rise and coil like living things. Doors slam shut without a draft, and lanterns flare brighter when he enters a space. Size means little to him. In Shanghai, he grew to a towering height, large enough to dwarf his own ship, his face filling the sky like the moon at its closest pass. He can shrink just as easily, slipping behind small objects or appearing in spaces where no full-grown pirate could fit. His shape is equally malleable. On more than one occasion, his head has twisted into grotesque shapes for a scare, his jaw unhinging wider than a human's ever could, his features elongating into something ancient and unkind. The green glow that surrounds him is more than ornament. It carries with it a kind of presence, a pressure in the water, a subtle change in the taste of the air. To the living, it is unsettling. To other spirits, it is a warning. The glow is part of how he travels, too. One moment the space before you is empty, and the next, the light blooms there, and he is standing in it. This ability to appear without crossing the distance is one of the things that makes him so feared. There is no outrunning him, because you can never be certain where he will appear next. And then there is his voice. He can boom like a storm, rattle every loose board on a ship, make the sand beneath your feet tremble. But he can also speak softly, and the sound will arrive in your ear without crossing the space between you. In Scaredy Pants, his voice cut through the laughter of Halloween like a cold wind, turning a cheerful night into something charged with unease. It is not just the volume or the tone, it is the certainty that when he speaks, you are meant to listen. His powers extend to transformation, not just of himself, but of others. In Shanghai, he turned Squidward into a living shell with a thought, sending him tumbling over the side of the ship and into the open water. The change was instant and complete, and he made no effort to reverse it. To him, such acts are not cruel so much as efficient. The curse seems to have given him little patience for negotiations when a demonstration will suffice. Yet for all this, his powers are not without limits. Or perhaps it is better to say they are not without boundaries. The Dutchman cannot set foot on land. He can hover above it, he can send his fog to drift over it, he can even bring his ship into streets and alleys beneath the waves. But the dry world is barred to him. This is part of the curse's price. He may roam the sea freely, but he will never again feel the solid weight of earth beneath his boots. The other boundary is the haunting itself. He cannot simply stop. Even in Ghost Host, when he confessed to SpongeBob that he had grown bored of scaring, he did not stop entirely. The work is built into him now, as much a part of him as the green in his beard or the hum of the chest. Whether he enjoys it or not, the curse demands that he continue. If there is a choice in how he haunts, in whether it is a grand spectacle or a small, precise fright, it is still a choice within a path already laid out for him. The Chest of Souls is the most mysterious of his powers, or perhaps the most mysterious part of his curse. In Shanghai, when SpongeBob and Patrick found it, the Dutchman appeared instantly to block their escape. He did not need to shout to make his ownership clear. What lies inside is not for others to touch, and even opening the chest is something he does rarely, and never without purpose. Some say it is the source of his power. Others believe it is his weakness, the one thing that could end his reign. The truth remains with him, locked as tightly as the chest itself. Taken together, his powers and his curse form a life that is both enviable and tragic. To command a ship with a thought, to appear anywhere, to reshape the world around you, These are gifts any mortal might dream of. But to do it forever, without rest, without the chance to walk on land or set aside the work for even a day, that is the price. And it is not a small one. The Dutchman bears it with the pride of a captain who still considers himself master of his fate, even if fate itself is the sea he must forever sail. So when the green light blooms and the air grows heavy, when chains stir without wind and a shadow the size of a ship falls across your path, remember this: what you are seeing is not just a ghost. It is the will of the curse made visible, the shape it has chosen to wear, the voice it has chosen to speak in. The Dutchman is many things: pirate, captain, collector of souls, but above all, he is the living proof that some legends do not fade. They are bound, and they bind in turn, until the sea itself accepts them as part of its endless tide. For all his powers, for all the weight of his curse and the centuries spent sailing a ship that belongs to no world but his own, the Flying Dutchman is not without a sense of humor. But it is not the kind of humor that comes in warm bursts of laughter around a table or the gentle teasing of old friends. His humor is sharper, stranger, often unsettling. It is the humor of someone who has spent so long outside the ordinary flow of life that what is amusing to him may feel like a test to everyone else. This side of the Dutchman shows itself most clearly in Ghost Host, when a small accident, the ship striking an undersea mountain, forced him to bring his vessel into dry dock for repairs. With his home unfit for haunting, he needed somewhere to stay. He could have chosen any number of empty caves or forgotten shipwrecks, but instead he appeared at SpongeBob's door, declaring his intention to move in. From the moment he stepped inside the pineapple, the house ceased to be entirely SpongeBob's little walls. Walls shifted to new angles. Doors opened into different rooms than the ones they had a moment earlier. Furniture rearranged itself with no sound but the faint creak of wood under strain. SpongeBob, ever eager to please, welcomed these changes at first, but they were only the beginning. The Dutchman approached haunting not as a simple act of fright but as a form of entertainment. He played pranks that only a ghost with centuries of practice could invent. He would disappear mid-sentence and reappear behind SpongeBob, speaking as though he had never left. He would shrink small enough to hide in a cereal box, waiting for the exact moment to leap out with a cackle. The pineapple's kitchen became a stage for food that cooked itself into unrecognizable forms, utensils that floated just out of reach, and plates that stacked themselves into towers only to topple the moment SpongeBob turned his back. And yet, there was no malice in these acts, at least not the kind meant to wound. The Dutchman wasn't trying to harm SpongeBob, he was trying to amuse himself. When you live forever, patterns become dull. Mortals offer a kind of novelty that even a ghost ship's endless horizon can't match. Their reactions, shock, laughter, confusion, are unpredictable, and unpredictability is a treasure to someone whose days are otherwise shaped by the fixed lines of a curse. Still, his humor could edge toward the cruel without him seeming to notice. In Shanghai, when SpongeBob, Patrick, and Squidward found themselves aboard his ship, the Dutchman offered them a way out. 3 doors, each leading to a different fate. It was a game to him, a chance to watch them hesitate and wonder which choice would doom them least. The fact that none of the doors led anywhere pleasant was part of the joke. The stakes, for the Dutchman, were low, but for those making the choice, the game was far more dangerous. This kind of humor works because the Dutchman knows his audience can never truly match him in power. He can afford to toy with them, to push them into situations that blur the line between frightening and absurd. He delights in watching mortals struggle to make sense of a reality that bends to his will. The green glow, the sudden shifts in scale, the way a harmless object can become threatening in his presence, all of it is part of his performance. Even his scares are often laced with comedy. In Scaredy Pants, after deciding that SpongeBob's Halloween costume was unworthy of the title Ghost, he set out to demonstrate what real fright looked like. His face stretched, his jaw opened wider than any jaw should, and his voice thundered through the streets. But when the moment of terror had passed, there was a glimmer of satisfaction in his expression, the satisfaction of a performer whose act had landed exactly as intended. The scare was genuine, but so was his enjoyment of the artistry behind it. Living with the Dutchman's humor is a lesson in constant vigilance. One moment he might be floating idly in a corner, appearing almost disinterested. The next, he might have rearranged the entire room without making a sound, just to watch the realization dawn on you. He has a taste for timing, the kind that comes not from rushing, but from waiting for the precise second when surprise will bloom into either laughter or panic. His humor also serves a deeper purpose. It keeps him connected to the living world, if only in fleeting bursts. Through his pranks and tricks, he interacts with mortals on a level that is not purely about fear or dominance. It allows him to see them as more than potential souls for his chest, and it allows them, if only briefly, to see him as more than a curse-bound wraith. This balance keeps his legend alive in a way sheer terror cannot. Fear fades. Stories of strange, funny encounters last much longer. Still, the Dutchman does not forget his role. Every joke, every prank, is framed by the larger truth that he is a ghost pirate bound to haunt forever. His humor is not an escape from that truth. It is a way of living within it. By turning his endless task into a game, he keeps boredom at bay. By crafting scares that make him laugh as well as his victims, he reminds himself that even eternity can be bent into shapes worth inhabiting. For those who meet him, the experience is never just frightening or just amusing. It is both, in a blend that can be disorienting. You might laugh in relief one moment and shiver the next, realizing that the laughter was exactly what he wanted before delivering the real scare. Or you might be terrified first, only to find the edge softened by something absurd, a pie in the face, a harmless object suddenly sprouting eyes. In the end, the Dutchman's strange humor is as much a part of his legend as his ship or his curse. It is the thing that makes him unpredictable, that keeps his hauntings from becoming rote. You never quite know whether he will loom above you in a display of supernatural power, or slip something ridiculous into your pocket while you aren't looking. Both are equally likely, and both serve the same purpose, to remind you that in his world, the rules are his to write, and you are only here because he allows it. So if you ever find yourself in the Dutchman's company, and he smiles at you in that knowing, lopsided way, prepare yourself. The next thing he does might make you laugh. It might make you scream. It might even make you do both at once. And that, more than any single prank or scare, is the punchline he enjoys the most. Bikini Bottom may be the place most familiar with the Flying Dutchman's ghostly visits, but it is far from the only corner of the ocean that has felt his presence. His ship sails beyond the reach of familiar landmarks, gliding through waters where maps become unreliable and where even experienced sailors feel their courage thin. Out there, in the deeper and stranger stretches of the sea, the Dutchman's legend takes on a different shape, one less softened by the routines of a small town and more raw in its mystery. To understand this, you have to picture the open ocean as he knows it. It is not the cheerful blue expanse seen in postcards or surface photographs. Down where his ship travels, the water is darker, the light falling away in soft layers until it is no more than a suggestion. Shapes pass in the distance without revealing themselves. The currents here do not simply move, they guide, as if taking instructions from something older than tide charts. In these places, a ship can sail for days without sighting anything but the slow rise and fall of the seafloor. And yet, for the Dutchman, these empty stretches are full of company. They are where he encounters other ghosts, not just of people but of ships themselves. Vessels long sunk, still carrying the faint outline of their crews, drifting without destination. Some recognize him and steer away, unwilling to test their luck. Others approach, drawn by the glow of his lanterns, only to vanish when they realize whose territory they've entered. It is here, far from any port, that the Dutchman's role as a kind of warden becomes most obvious. There are stories, true ones, of entire encounters happening in these distant waters. A merchant ship once found itself suddenly shadowed by a vessel it swore had not been there moments before. The green glow seeped across its deck, and the crew froze, every man and woman staring upward as the Dutchman's ship drifted alongside without a word. The two ships sailed in parallel for what felt like hours, the ghostly vessel never once touching the waves with a wake, until it finally turned and vanished into fog that had not been there a moment earlier. No harm was done, but the crew never forgot the feeling of being measured, of having their fates weighed and ultimately set aside. Not all encounters are so distant. In Shanghai, the Dutchman's ship carried SpongeBob, Patrick, and Squidward far beyond the edge of their familiar world. The ocean around them grew darker, and strange silhouettes passed beneath the hull, too large and too slow to be fish. There were rock formations shaped like faces that seemed to watch the ship glide past. At one point, the water grew so still it felt as though they were sailing through glass. These are the regions where reality thins, where the Dutchman's influence is strongest, and where his power to appear anywhere is most potent. Sometimes he visits underwater communities much smaller than Bikini Bottom, PSS places without the infrastructure or population to mount the kind of gossip and legend trading that keeps his name alive in larger towns. In these places, his arrival is more than an event. It is a disruption to the rhythm of life. A single appearance might become the central story told for years afterward. Children are warned not to stray too far from home, not out of fear of ordinary dangers, but because the Dutchman is said to collect the curious. Whether he actually takes anyone in these moments is less important than the fact that people believe he might. Then there are the encounters with solitary wanderers, deep-sea divers, treasure hunters, and would-be pirates trying to carve their own names into the ocean's memory. Many claim to have seen him in the periphery, a glow on the horizon that never gets closer, or the faint silhouette of a ship against a backdrop of absolute black. A few tell of boarding derelict vessels only to find fresh footprints on the deck, too large and too deliberate to belong to anyone human. These stories often end abruptly, with the teller trailing off as if unsure whether the memory is entirely their own. The Dutchman's humor, which so often colors his interactions in Bikini Bottom, is muted in these far-off encounters. Here, in the deep, he is less the prankster and more the keeper of boundaries. His curse compels him to haunt, but haunting does not always mean scaring. Sometimes it means reminding travelers that they are not alone, that the sea is watched, and that some of its watchers do not answer to mortal law. Still, even in these remote waters, his sense of performance remains. The fog does not simply appear. It grows in slow curls, building tension. The green light comes in pulses, hinting at his location without revealing it until the moment is right. He may allow a glimpse of his face through a break in the mist, just long enough for the image to burn into memory. Or he might let the outline of the ship pass overhead when you are diving below, so close that the shadow feels like it presses against your skin. These are not accidents. They are part of how he ensures that his legend travels farther than he does. In Ghost Host, we see that even the Dutchman grows restless if kept in one place too long. Out here, that restlessness becomes a kind of roaming, not in search of conquest or treasure, but in search of moments that keep eternity from becoming too quiet. Each encounter beyond Bikini Bottom adds another layer to his story, another point of contact for those who will speak of him in hushed tones. And because these meetings are so infrequent, each one is given more weight in the telling. There is also a sense, among those who know the deeper parts of the ocean, that the Dutchman has territories. Some areas, marked by odd changes in current or by persistent fog banks, are said to be his preferred hunting grounds. Ships that pass through these regions report feeling watched, even when nothing unusual appears on the horizon. Lights flicker, compasses turn lazy circles, and in the rare cases where the Dutchman's ship does appear, the meeting is remembered as both an honor and a warning. Beyond Bikini Bottom, the ocean belongs to fewer rules. Here, the Dutchman's curse feels larger, less constrained by the patterns of a single community. The same powers he uses to amuse himself in town are, in these waters, reminders of what he truly is: a ghost captain, a collector, a force that moves at the edge of maps and memory. For the living, an encounter with him out here is something you do not forget. You may leave unharmed, but you will carry the image of that green glow in your mind for the rest of your days. And perhaps that is the truest haunting of all. Not the taking of a soul, but the planting of a memory so vivid that it lives with you, surfacing in quiet moments when you least expect it. There is a part of the Flying Dutchman's ship that few have seen, and even fewer have left with their memories intact. It lies deep below the deck, past corridors that twist in ways ships should not twist, through doors that never seem to be in the same place twice. This is the treasure hold, though the word treasure does not quite describe what waits there. To most pirates, treasure means gold coins spilling from chests, glittering jewels, silver goblets, and other spoils taken from the living. But the Dutchman's treasure is different. It is quieter, colder, and far more dangerous. It is the chest of souls. The chest itself looks ancient, though whether it has aged or whether it simply emerged from the sea already marked by centuries is impossible to tell. Its wood is blackened, not with rot, but with something deeper, the kind of darkness that seems to absorb light rather than merely block it. Green chains wrap around it, their links carved with symbols no one alive can read. The lock is massive, shaped like a screaming face, and when you stand near it, you can almost swear you hear a faint whisper coming from inside. In Shanghai, SpongeBob and Patrick stumbled upon this very chest. They were drawn to it the way a diver is drawn to a glimmer on the seafloor, curious without understanding why. The room was lit only by the green glow that seemed to leak from the seams of the chest, casting strange, shifting patterns on the walls. It did not feel like a place for gold or jewels. It felt like a vault for something alive, or something that had once been alive and still remembered what it meant. The Dutchman appeared almost instantly when they touched it, materializing with no sound but the slight rattle of his chains. He didn't shout. He didn't need to. The look in his eyes was enough to make it clear that they had crossed into a place they were not meant to be. The chest was his most guarded possession, and to tamper with it was to invite a fate neither of them wanted to imagine. Legends differ on exactly what the chest contains. Some say it holds the souls of all those the Dutchman has claimed over the centuries, each one trapped in a state between life and death, bound to his service until he chooses to release them, if he ever does. Others believe it is the source of his power, and that to destroy it would be to free him from his curse. But if that is true, it might also destroy him entirely, and the Dutchman has never been one to take chances with his own existence. There are even whispers that the chest contains something far more personal, his own heart, removed when he first became a ghost and locked away so it could not betray him. This would explain why he guards it so fiercely, why even a touch from the living earns his immediate attention. Yet this theory raises its own questions. If his heart is in the chest, what keeps it beating? Or does it beat at all? What is certain is that no one has ever successfully taken anything from the chest. Those who have tried, whether by accident or design, have not returned to tell their stories. The Dutchman is swift when his treasure is threatened, and his powers seem even more potent when he is near it. The air around the chest is heavier, the green light brighter, and the sense of being watched sharper, as though the ship itself becomes an extension of his will in that moment. Some say the chest is cursed not just to protect its contents, but to protect the one who opens it. If a living person were to force it open, the curse might claim them instantly, binding them to the Dutchman's service or trapping their soul inside. This idea is not hard to believe, given the chest's unsettling hum and the way its chains seem to shift slightly, as if they can sense the presence of intruders. It is not hard to imagine that the Dutchman sometimes visits the chest not out of necessity, but out of a kind of grim companionship. For all his power, for all the centuries he has sailed, the life of a cursed ghost can be lonely. The chest, in its own way, might be the closest thing he has to company that will never leave him. Whether it contains souls, memories, or pieces of himself, it is something he can always return to, something that is his alone, untouched by the changing tides of the world outside. And so the treasure remains, locked away in the belly of a ship that answers only to its captain. The Dutchman does not display it for others, nor does he boast about its value. It is not wealth to be spent or traded. It is a possession that defines him, one that he will guard until the end of his curse, and perhaps beyond, if such a thing is possible for someone like him. If you ever find yourself aboard the Flying Dutchman's ship and feel the air grow heavier, if the corridors seem to shift and lead you downward, if the green light begins to pulse instead of simply glowing, turn back. Do not let curiosity lead you to the treasure hold. Do not touch the chest. Do not listen to the whispers that might slip from it, no matter how much they sound like voices you know. Because if you do, the Dutchman will appear. And when he does, you will understand that this is not treasure in the sense mortals use the word. This is something greater, older, and far more dangerous, and it is not yours to take. Encounters with the Flying Dutchman never last as long as they feel. Whether you meet him in the streets of Bikini Bottom, in the silent corridors of his ship, or in the dark stretches of sea where no other vessel sails, time bends in his presence. Minutes stretch like hours, and every detail imprints itself on your mind. The faint rattle of chains, the curl of green fog, the way the light seems to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. But eventually, it always ends the same way. The Dutchman sails away. There is no fixed ritual to his departures. Sometimes he goes suddenly, vanishing in a blink, leaving only a momentary echo of his laughter in the water. Other times, he draws it out, letting the ship glide slowly into the mist, its lanterns fading until they are no more than pinpricks of green against the dark. Yet no matter how he chooses to leave, there is always the sense that it is his decision alone. The meeting is over because he has decided it is over. In Shanghai, after a series of strange and dangerous choices for his unwilling guests, the Dutchman finally set SpongeBob and Patrick back on their way. There was no grand explanation, no thanks for their company, just the abrupt end of the game, the shift of the ship beneath their feet, and the realization that they were no longer where they had been. Squidward, in his transformed shell form, had been cast overboard long before, his fate decided without ceremony. That is the Dutchman's way. Endings can be as sudden and final as a door slamming shut. Other times, as in Ghost Host, his leaving feels almost reluctant. When his ship was finally repaired, he departed SpongeBob's pineapple with a kind of satisfaction, not because he had caused chaos, but because he had broken the monotony of his curse for a while. Even a ghost bound to haunt forever can enjoy a change of scenery, and perhaps in his own way, the Dutchman was grateful for the distraction. Still, the farewell was not sentimental. His work, his eternal duty, awaited him back aboard his ship, and he returned to it without looking back. There's a pattern to these departures if you watch closely. The fog always gathers first, thickening in the water or the streets around him. The green light intensifies for a moment, flaring brighter than at any other time during the encounter. This is not for show alone. It seems to be part of the way he moves between places. The ship responds to it instinctively, sails turning to catch a wind that is not there, the hull shifting as though pulled by unseen currents. And then, with a steady, unhurried motion, the Flying Dutchman slips away. Witnesses often speak of a strange silence after he's gone, not just the absence of his voice or the clink of his chains, but a deeper, quiet, as if the water itself is holding its breath. This silence can last for seconds or for minutes, and when it ends, the return of normal sound feels almost too loud. It's in this gap that people realize how heavy his presence had been, how it had pressed into the very space around them. There's never a sense that you've seen the last of him. That's part of the haunting. Even as the fog clears and the green light fades, you know, as surely as the tide will turn, that the Dutchman could appear again at any time. You don't control when, you don't get to prepare. The legend does not run on your schedule. Some sailors claim that when he sails away, he is not simply leaving but moving to another appointment, another soul to visit or scare or test. This would explain how sightings of him occur in places impossibly far apart within the same span of hours. His ship does not obey the distances and delays that hold mortal vessels. It moves according to a different kind of map, one drawn in fog and memory. Others believe he sometimes departs not for a new target but simply to roam. For a ghost who has seen the same waves for centuries, there must be comfort in motion for its own sake. The creak of the deck, the whisper of the sails, the familiar glow spilling from the railings into the water below. Roaming keeps the curse from feeling too much like a prison. It turns eternity into a voyage, even if there's no destination in mind. And perhaps this is the truth at the core of every departure. The Dutchman is not leaving you so much as continuing. His story does not pause when he disappears from sight. It flows on without you, through other seas, into other nights, across encounters you will never witness, but that will, in their own time, become someone else's first meeting with the legend. You are just one chapter in a book he has been writing since the day he rose from his coffin and took command of his ghostly ship. If you are lucky enough, or unlucky enough, to see him leave, watch closely. Note the way the sails take on that strange, impossible wind. Listen for the fading rhythm of the chains, as if they're still swaying even after he's gone. And remember the last image you see of him, because it will likely be the only part of the encounter that stays clear in your memory. Everything else, the words he spoke, the exact details of what happened, will blur over time. But the sight of him sailing into the mist, his figure framed against the green glow, will remain sharp. There is a reason he never truly says goodbye. Goodbyes imply finality, a parting with no return. The Flying Dutchman knows better. His curse ensures that there will always be another night, another fog, another moment when the sea calls you to look over your shoulder and wonder if the glow you see is just your imagination, or if he has come back for you. And so he sails away, not into the sunset like mortal captains, but into the endless twilight that belongs only to him. The waters close behind his ship without a ripple, and the darkness swallows the glow until it is as though he was never there. But the sea remembers, and so do you.